Hello again, Iliana's Alliance members. So here we are at the end of the year, and I was thinking of what I could share that would be Forward Edge related, but maybe even have some broader relevance beyond Forward Edge. And if you were at our banquet in Vancouver just last October, you would have heard me share about some people who had served on Forward Edge teams back in the 1980s and how that experience really had a powerful impact on their lives. One of those folks has been serving in India for 25 years. Another one has been serving in Southeast Asia for 30 years. And a third person who went with me on a trip to Nepal in 1986 now has a ministry in many countries in Africa. So just examples of people who really were impacted by their involvement on Forward Edge teams. And more recently, I had a conversation with somebody I had been introduced to, and I wanted to talk to him about something that was up with Forward Edge. And before we got into our conversation, he said, you know, I think I know about Forward Edge. I went on a team to Birmingham, England in 1986, and it was the Billy Graham Crusade, and we did evangelism. And it turns out Karen and I, my wife and I, were actually the facilitators of that team. And he went on to describe, he was a senior in high school at the time. He's 52 years old now. And he went on to describe how that experience of going on that Forward Edge team to England in 1986 really impacted the trajectory of his life. He was a missionary for several years, an associate pastor for several years, and now is an executive at a Christian NGO in San Diego. So it's just this reminder that, you know, not only that God uses Forward Edge to provide these opportunities for people to have life-changing experiences, but we often never know the impact of our service of the Lord. And I just wanted to close this year by sharing a story that some of you may have heard, because I have shared this 2-3 years ago at another Forward Edge event. It's an experience I had visiting some Iliana's Alliance members actually in Pennsylvania. And one of the folks that were sitting with us at the table, Karen and I was with me, Karen was with me, they asked me to tell my story, you know, share a little bit about my faith journey. And I got to the point in my story when I was in India, I wasn't a Christian, I was meditating on a cot in a funky room on top of a hotel in Delhi, India, and I had a vision of a cross on the door, and the mid-vertical and top horizontal boards of the door became slightly illuminated, and I remember thinking, it's Jesus. Jesus is the way. So as I shared this story with these Iliana's Alliance members and friends of theirs at the table, one of the women her eyes just opened up wide and said, I have to show you this. I just read it yesterday. And she ran off and came back with a book that told the story of medieval craftsmen 1,000 years ago who would start out as interns, and then some of them would become journeymen, and some would become, well, I think it was interns, apprentices, journeymen, and then master craftsmen. And in this book, it was telling the story of master wood craftsmen who decided to design a door with a mid-vertical and top horizontal board that would display the cross. And they made these doors to honor Jesus. And when I read this story, I realized 3 things immediately. One was those guys, those medieval craftsmen, had no idea that God would use their simple act of obedience to impact a young man on the roof of a hotel in Delhi, India, 1,000 years in the future. Another thing I realized was that God is completely outside of time, so to him 1,000 years is nothing. And the third thing I realized is that none of us will ever know the full impact, the full value and ultimate impact of our own small acts of obedience. So I just wanted to leave that with you at the end of this year, to just not grow weary in well-doing. We'll never know in this life, you know, how our lives can impact others. We'll never know fully the story of that. And that impact can ripple out for generations and even millennia. So be encouraged. You know, God is using whatever it is we're doing, even if we don't know the result in this life. And don't grow weary in well-doing. God bless you. I look forward to being with you again next year. Have a very Merry Christmas. God bless.